Welcome to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast, where we cut through the noise and help you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff Somke. Tyler DiPeppe is a former member of the Atomwaffen Division, an accelerationist neo-Nazi group that has seen its members convicted of crimes ranging from murder to planning terror attacks on the nation's power grid. Tyler himself pleaded guilty to conspiracy to mail threatening communications and to commit cyberstalking. Tyler is also a transgender man, which the group was not aware of when he got involved. Tyler is now out of the white nationalist movement and is working to help others leave and to prevent people from getting involved in the first place. His is a truly compelling story, and I'm fortunate to have him with me today to talk about it. Stick around.
This is a crusade. This is a holy war against the deep state.
Where are the dictators? Where are the strong men?
Donald Trump is our instrument for retribution.
I'm going to fight for Christians. I'm going to fight for white people.
They have the Great Reset. We have the Great Awakening.
And why shouldn't I root for Russia? Because I am.
I want to see these people go through misery because of their grooming against our children.
After the assailant entered the home asking, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" Those are the very same words used by the mob when they stormed the United States Capitol.
I did nothing wrong.
Tyler, welcome to Did Nothing Wrong. Thanks for coming on today.
You're welcome.
It seems like you had a really, really awful childhood. You mentioned in one of the articles that I read prepping for this that you have been aware that you were different since you were about, I think you said 6 years old.
Yeah.
How well were you able to kind of articulate that to the people around you, and how did they respond?
So when my mom, just one day I looked at my mom and I said, "Am I gonna get those?" pointing at her boobs. And she was like, "Well, yeah, of course, honey." And I was like 6 years old and I just started bawling my eyes out and saying,
Oh,
"I
man.
really don't want those."
Fuck.
And then that was for realization that like, oh, okay, that's a little weird.
Something's different here. This is
Yeah,
not what I thought I was getting when it comes to kids.
I did not want that at 6 years old thinking about my future. I thought that at that time, being a kid, like, oh yeah, no, for sure, I don't have to be that,
Right.
hopefully. And my mom had like a very weird reaction to that because by this time she's already like letting me play with boys' toys or dress in boy clothes because she's just like, oh hey, my kid's just a tomboy, no big deal.
Right. Right.
My dad, though, when he got custody of me when I was like 8 or 9, he didn't really have the same reaction. He didn't want me to have many boys' toys, so he'd buy me more girl toys. He was like, absolutely not. You're not dressing up in boy clothes.
Uh-huh.
That's just not what we're doing here.
So that was just not something he was prepared to deal with at all. He wanted a daughter.
Oh, yeah, no. And I actually kind of made him late to his wedding with my stepmom by about like an hour because I refused to put on the dress that they got for the wedding. And he was not too happy about that.
Yeah, she's probably starting to wonder at that point if he's even coming. Like if she's going to get left at the altar or something like that. You know, that old story.
Yeah.
Probably like, you don't understand. This is really important stuff here. I got to be there on time. And you're just like, fine, then don't make me wear a dress.
Yeah. I ended up wearing the dress anyways, but
So what was life like growing up in like with your peers? Did you catch a lot of really nasty stuff from them over the years when you were a kid?
oh yeah. When I was 6 years old, obviously, I guess I'm a girl. And then a lot of the kids are like, why are you dressing like that if you're a girl?
Ugh,
And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I just like dressing like this. I'm a kid.
right.
Didn't really have a other reaction besides that. But as I get older and older, I think I like the first instance of like actual backlash from dressing like that because eventually my dad gave up, right?
Right.
He was like, "Well, I'll let you just be comfortable however you want to be."
Right.
So I'm 13 and I'm dressing more like a boy again. And I was in middle school and I got bullied a lot for being a lesbian just
Right.
because of the way I dressed. And I was like, all right, well, at that point, I was already out as like bisexual, but got bullied for being a lesbian.
Might as well lean in.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I eventually began like I guess like your pre-T transition, like pre-testosterone transition, where I just cut my hair. I started completely getting rid of like any piece of my wardrobe that was girl clothes,
Right.
basically.
Right.
And my dad was cool with that. He was like, well, okay, whatever, that's fine. Like, do what
Right.
you want to do. And him and I actually sat down because I left him a note one day on the table for him after work because I didn't know how to actually talk to him about wanting to transition. And he read through the note and he was like, all right, we'll get you some help. We'll get you a therapist. We'll see if you actually want to be on testosterone.
Huh. Okay. Okay. Seems relatively reasonable for
Eh,
somebody who probably never expected to have that conversation.
No, so it's my dad and I have a very strange relationship. So I started testosterone at 16, and he told me, hey, you have 6 months to decide to reverse this. Other than that, like if you go past that 6 month mark, I can't help you if you regret it.
Right.
And I was like, hey, I don't think I'm gonna regret this. I think we'll be fine. And he really hammered that for like a year before I started it because I mentioned wanting to transition at 15 the year prior. And he was like, hey, I really just don't want you to regret this. I don't want you to regret this. Well, 25 now, so I obviously don't regret it. But
Mhm.
I mean, he was cool with it, and he actually joked and said to me one time, he was like, hey, not for nothing, I'm really glad that you transitioned because it's cheaper to take care of you, unlike your sister. He was like, I'm
Nice.
so glad I don't have to buy makeup every day or this and that. And I was like, all right, good, I guess.
Nice. Nice.
The weird inner path that we're at right now is, in terms of a relationship with my dad, I pretty much found out I really prefer men,
Right.
and he is really against that. Isn't that fucked up?
You're so close. You're so close. You almost there. You've almost got it. But then,
Right.
right? The one thing you'd think everybody would kind of have figured out how to be cool with by now. It's like,
Yep.
nope.
Was like, why would you transition just to like men? And I was like, it's not, it's not that simple, brother.
Right. Right. It's like, this is very complicated stuff, and I completely understand, you not really understanding that, but yeah, just
Yeah.
let me figure it out from here, I guess.
He's totally cool with me being trans, but then like being a little gay just slightly puts him off. I don't know.
That is wild.
Right now it's just kind of weird between us because like him and we're good, but I'm pretty sure he knows that I'm dating a man and
Right.
won't talk about it.
Man, it's that guy. That's funny. That's
Yeah, it's
just the
strange.
idea that like that's the part you can't get your head around. That's making me laugh
Yeah.
right now. It's like of everything. So, how did you go from being, a high school kid with, wanting to transition, maybe wanting to be in that position? How did you end up getting involved with maybe the most notorious white supremacist terror group that's out there right now? Walk me through how that went.
It's a little bit of a slow burn. So when I was 16, starting the testosterone and everything, I'm like, what can I do to fully pass as a man or be a man?
Right.
And I started falling down, the alt-right pipeline that started around that time. Was it 2016, 2017?
Yes, yes, there was a lot of content that
Yeah.
was gonna lead you down a pretty dark road pretty fast if you were consuming it.
Oh, it got me. Trust me, it got me, bit me right on my ass. Yeah, I started looking into that content and really falling for like, oh, this will make you a man. And I was like, well, that's the quickest way to, fit in, be normal, I guess. It started with your usual conservative YouTubers, Ben Shapiro at the time, Milo Yiannopoulos at the time, Gavin McInnes,
Right, right,
and then it just got worse and worse. I started actually seeing like the Reed Siege bullshit
right,
on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and it just kept happening over and over again. But the
right,
first place I saw it was my Tumblr, and that's the last place you would assume to see something like that. Somebody
right.
messages me and says Reed Siege because I'm just sitting there bitching about the world.
Because Tumblr's supposed to be the SJW sites. Tumblr's supposed to be where the crazy SJWs hang
Exactly.
out, right? So
Supposedly, right?
that's what I always heard.
Yeah, yeah. But no, that guy, he messaged me that, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a little weird. I'm not gonna read a fucking book though. I don't want to fucking read. To be honest with you, that's what my mindset at the time.
Yeah, no, and it's a large book and it's not great writing. And yeah, I can totally see why you wouldn't necessarily want
Yeah,
to get into this. It's like, what the fuck is this?
yeah, it was terrible fucking writing. I mean, I've read
Yeah.
decent books now. Actually, I read a lot of like depressing books now, per se, I guess.
Hmm.
But they're like depressing books to make you feel less depressed. They just tell
Okay.
stories, like real
Okay.
life stories.
Okay. So somebody hits you up on Tumblr and they tell you to read Siege, which was kind of a meme at that point, but it
Yep.
definitely got a lot of people to read Siege, which we obviously never recommend anybody do. Shout out to Spencer Sunshine. Read about Siege. He wrote a great book on it. He's been on the program a couple times
hmm
to talk about it.
I still have a copy.
Right on. Right on. Yeah, Spencer's good people. Okay, so you got some messages telling you to read Siege. You evidently at least entertained part of that. How did that go for you once you read Siege?
Listen, the fucking writing is chaotic at points. But yeah, I entertained the idea. I read through it at the time, being someone that didn't really read books. I was like, oh, this is like a masterpiece. This is comparable to religious text. It has all the answers from the past like 20 years that I didn't even experience necessarily. It kind of invigorates you in a strange way. It makes you feel important, as
Sure.
I'm pretty sure you've heard. It makes you feel very important. It feels like you can really do something to change society.
Yeah. You've gotten a hold of this like esoteric, almost forbidden knowledge in a way, and you are part of the elite
Yeah,
now. You know stuff other people don't.
yeah, that's exactly how it felt. And I remember around this time, maybe I'm a little loose with this because I gotta be honest with you, my time frames are not really spectacular.
No, that's fine. Just get it close. It's fine.
All right, I heard about the initial like first arrest of Brandon Russell and Atomwaffen, and I was paying really close attention to that. And then, I did my backlog research on the group, and I remember saying one time to my buddy, I was like, honestly, this would be worthwhile. This would be good. This would be changing the world. And he looked at me and he said, Tyler, you are a fucking idiot. He's like, I love you to death. You are a fucking idiot. You are trans. They will kill you. He's like, not even to mention the fact that like they're fucking racist, but you are trans and they will kill you.
Yeah, that would have been my thought too. I sounds like a pretty smart friend, honestly. Kind of a they're really not going to like it when they find out that particular side of things.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So let's talk a little about the Atomwaffen Division because we have talked a fair amount about white supremacist and accelerationist terrorist groups on this program, and the Atomwaffen Division is one of the ones that always gets mentioned. So, for those people who might be kind of newer to it, can you give us a real short summary of who they are and what they believe?
Yeah, so Atomwaffen Division was, and through the grapevine, I know it's still active in like splinter groups right now,
Right.
but it was slash is a group built off of white supremacy, but it is very convoluted, mixed with a lot of different views, which causes a lot of infighting.
Right.
And the group doesn't really have a path they necessarily follow. They just are full of rage and want to
Hmm.
take it out on the world in any way they can, and they use the white supremacy as an excuse to hold themselves up and feel good while also saying, oh, we're doing something to protect the white race.
And what is their end goal in terms of like if they got everything they wanted, what would it be?
Oh, it's just pure, pure murder. Blood on the streets, my friend.
They want the world to burn then.
Yeah.
Okay. I know what you were saying about how there's been some infighting about some of the doctrine. I know at one point there was a group that were more aligned with some satanic factions that got a hold of it and tried to kind of turn it in that direction. And there were some kind of internal arguments about it. It seems like people have come in and tried to point this group one direction or another for their own purposes. Would you say it's like tightly organized, has the same kind of leadership as like a like say for instance Patriot Front, where you've got a Thomas Rousseau at the front of it who can point to stuff and micromanage every last little detail? Or is it more comprised of like individual kind of cells of people working together?
It is very individual cells.
Okay.
There's different cells in every state. There's the main center of the group that kind of controls everything called the nucleus,
Okay.
and everybody would have to report to members of the nucleus from their cell,
Right.
but there
Right.
would be cell leaders. To say that like they really had a hold on us though is it's true and not at the same time. I mean, there are a lot of people from Atomwaffen that like incited violence other places, and it was arguable enough that like because they weren't commanded to incite violence somewhere, they weren't necessarily at fault, like the group as a whole.
Right. Right. The group could walk that back and say we didn't tell them to do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually an issue I had when I was talking to a journalist recently. He's trying to prove the connection of the Christchurch shooter to Atomwaffen. And I said that's really hard to prove because
Right.
nobody from the leadership has commanded that.
Right, right. I'm no expert, obviously. I just, I talk to a lot of people and I do this podcast, but that's not something I've ever heard. I mean, obviously, the guy was up on the propaganda. The guy was up on the whole concept that they have of saints. He knew a lot of the lore that Adam Waffen also crosses over with, but I don't think I've ever heard that he was actually a legit member of any real group like that. I don't think so. Not that I've ever heard.
Right. And he wasn't a legit member, but me personally, I think there's a lot of leeway to say, like, yeah, no, Adam Waffen definitely had a part to play with that. Somebody.
Sure, sure. Especially, the propaganda that came out of that group that was circulating in circles that guy was in. Obviously, he picked it up. The things he did would lead one to believe he was influenced by all of that. Definitely.
Yeah.
But he was kind of doing a cafeteria sort of style grab bag of things and put it together, at least seemed like, out of a lot of different manifestos over the years. And it seems like that's actually very common,
Yeah.
is people sort of grabbing a thing from here and a thing from there, and dash of Kaczynski and some James Mason.
Yeah, I was gonna say you could even argue sieges like that with James Mason's writings.
Hmm. And I've noticed that
So,
James Mason kind of walks it back every time somebody gets busted or every time somebody does something. I've heard a few interviews with Mason, and he always talks about how, he does this whole like, you're going to die, a death, and you're not even a revolutionary. You need to, if you're going to do something like this, be a revolutionary. And it's like, you're just kind of dissembling now.
hmm
You just don't want them to come after you.
exactly. He is so worried about prison.
Mm-hmm. Because he's not going to do well in prison, guys like him. We know what you're into. It's well documented.
Yeah, yeah. If they find out he's a pedophile in there, he's fucked.
Uh-huh. And just in case, there's any thought of potential legal action, Spencer Sunshine in his book Countercultural Fascism has documented quite well James Mason's pedophilia. James Mason has been busted for pedophilia. He's, served time. So no, he's a pedo. It's obvious.
Yeah,
There's no real
yeah.
doubt here. It's just the dude's a pedo. This is where he is. He hung out with other pedos. A lot of these guys were at that era. And, James Mason's just a product of all of that. He is.
Oh yeah.
So you reached out to these guys online. How did you end up getting involved with the actual Atomwaffen people? What was the process like for you?
So I originally was just starting to post more stuff similar to that sphere,
Right.
and I actually was contacted by like an old friend of mine who saw my posts and were like, "Hey, I can't tell if you're joking or you're serious about the shit that you're saying." And I said, "No, I'm being dead serious." And they're like, "Oh, well, actually, I can get you into this." And I ended up joining a skinhead group.
Okay.
So the group, they didn't really do much. It was somebody from high school that I knew that was the president and all that. And my only goal was to take everything I learned from him and then try to form a group down in Florida because at the time I was living in Florida, but I was still visiting my home state a lot. Yeah, I just started being very blunt with, hey, yeah, I'm a part of this group, and like my Instagram was not locked at this point, and I started making contact with so many people that were Nazis on Instagram, and it kind of after like 2 years, I want to say maybe a year or two, yeah, I had a guy reach out to me that was in the Florida cell of Atomwaffen and was like, "Hey, you seem to know what you're doing. We have no idea what the fuck we're doing. We need help. The cell is a shit show. I think you could fix this."
Huh. So they figured that, oh wow, this guy actually might know a thing or two. He seems like leadership material. Let's see about finding a way to bring this guy in. Okay.
Yep. And I was like, "Oh shit, Atomwaffen." Going back on previous years, I was like, "Yeah, I actually wanted to join them. Yeah, I'm gonna join them." So I dropped the skinhead shit, joined them, and it it was a shit show. I mean, you have a group of a bunch of angry teenagers. Yeah, it's not going to go well. But it was kind of surprising, I guess, how young they would let somebody in, and also I was surprised that I didn't get kicked out immediately because I skipped through the whole process of actually joining officially.
So there's like an actual initiation that they do, and you didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, and I don't even know what initiation would be. Besides, like, I know there was a reading list, but I don't know anything else past that, and I kind of just glided right under the radar on that.
Right. I think they probably, just from what you've told me, assumed that because you knew so much about how this all should work, they assumed you'd probably done that somewhere at some point. It just didn't seem like we can't ask the guy we brought in to kind of straighten us all out that
Yeah,
he do this initiation, you know? It's kind of like, yeah, that would have been weird. So yeah, that makes a certain amount of sense that they probably would have just looked at you like, "Oh, this guy obviously knows what he's talking about."
yeah. Now that you mention that, I didn't even think about that. I was just like, oh, I fucking flew under the radar.
Right, but I mean, it seems like from what you've said, they kinda saw you as leadership, like, right from the jump. So,
Yeah,
they might have thought, "God, we can't really ask this guy if he's ever been initiated." You know, it's like, "Man, he's kind of the guy we brought in to help us figure all this out. What if he gets pissed? You know, what if he takes
yeah,
this
that's a
really
good point.
badly at that point?" Yeah, that would I could see that. That would make a lot of sense because, like, from what you've told me, this bunch, and I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this bunch sounds like a bunch of followers who were looking for a leader.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
And you were that guy. You came in and you were that guy. You were the leader that they were looking for. And who's going to ask, the leader if the leader's actually filled out all the paperwork? Nobody's going to do that. That's just like you generally find that out in a very embarrassing manner when it comes out somewhere down the line that the leader hasn't with groups like that. It doesn't generally show up until then, and then the groups are like,
Yeah.
oh my God, whoops. We messed up.
So when I did join, I ended up dropping the leadership because I was asking them like, "Hey, where's your actual cell leader that was leading before this?" Because
Right.
the guy backed out for a little bit. I don't know why, personal reasons, but he backed out for a little bit. Then because I was talking and asking for like, "Hey, where's your ex-leader?" He came back. I ended up talking with him and I said, "Okay, you're back in charge, but I need you to listen to me."
Right. Right. So you kind of establish yourself almost as like the consigliere, the guy that would sort of help the leader figure out what was supposed to be done.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was more of like, hey, if I'm gonna get caught for this shit, you
Yeah,
know?
once I'm saying it.
Yeah.
Fair, fair. These people are kind of stupid, and I think maybe it would be a little better if I'm the one that sort of called a few more shots.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm not gonna be the leader per se if anything happens.
Yeah, yeah, you don't necessarily want that. How long were you involved with these guys?
That is a blur. I would say probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Okay,
Even with like the skinhead stuff included, probably 2.5 years.
okay. So it was relatively short time, but eventful, as it were.
Oh, very eventful. Yeah, you see some shit, that's for sure.
So you were kind of notorious for being involved in a conspiracy to intimidate some journalists. Like you guys were going around and putting flyers on cars and flyers on houses, letting them know kind of we know where you live and you've been visited by your local Nazis, I believe was one of the catchphrases.
Yep.
When you guys became notorious for what you were doing, when that particular operation hit the kind of mainstream, did they know yet that you were transgender? Had that all come out with those guys yet?
Um, y- yeah, so the funny thing is, 2 weeks before my arrest, literally 2 weeks, my partner at the time looked at me and said, "Hey, this is getting to be a bit too much. I'm so serious. It's either this bullshit or me, or else I'm leaving. I'm not dealing with this. I will not be around when you're arrested or you get caught doing something stupid." She was
Right,
like, "I know that this is not you, so either drop the act or I'm gonna be on my way." And I looked at her and I was like, "Well, fuck me. My back's against the wall here."
right.
And I said, "All right, you know what? I'll just tell them I'm trans and that I'm done. What are they gonna do?" And so I did.
And what did they do?
Oh, it was so funny. So, at this point, I kind of, I already told a few people in the Florida cell, like, "Hey, I'm trans," and then they were like, "Oh, now I feel uncomfortable with what I'm doing," type of thing, because they're like, "You're a good guy, though. You're a good guy, though." Like,
Right. Like it
that's
didn't bother
crazy.
anybody down
I don't
there.
want to
Crazy.
kill you. Yeah, they're like, "I don't want to kill you or anything."
That guy's our friend. We can't kill. I know what we said, but this is
Yeah.
Tyler. He's cool. We can't. Uh, man,
Yeah.
that must have broken some brains on their part. Just like,
Oh, it
oh,
definitely did for a hot minute. I remember the whole reason I told the leader at the time that I was trans is he told me something really personal, and I was like, "Oh, dude, it's no big deal. I'm trans." And he's like, "Bro, that's not funny. I'm telling you something serious." And I was like, "No, I'm dead serious." And then I was like, "Well, how am I gonna prove that I'm trans to him without him thinking I'm just making fun of him right now?"
right.
So I stood up and I punched myself in the crotch because I was like, "What else am I gonna do?"
Yeah. Well, seems effective.
And he looked at me and he was like, "Oh, now I have a lot of questions." And he was completely cool with it. He was just like, "Now I don't even know if I want to do this. No, I don't know." And I kept him in it for a while because I don't know, I'm just an asshole at that point.
Well, because then you have to be the leader. If that guy leaves, you got to be the leader, and you didn't want to be the leader.
Yeah, no, no. But he ended up staying for a while. I hope he's out of it now. I don't know, but it seemed towards the end that he didn't want to be there, so it was
Right.
good to hear. But yeah, so when I told the main leadership, like the nucleus about it, they were all freaking the fuck out. And they're like, "How did you let a woman into the group? What the fuck is wrong with you guys?" Like just chewing out the Florida cell entirely. And then they were arguing amongst themselves and they're like, "Well, he sounds like a dude, but I don't know." And they were just all confused. It was kind of funny. Actually, the cell leader that I had, he was like, "Yeah, it's chaotic for us right now." And he was like, "They're having a meltdown."
That is hilarious. Like they didn't know what to do about that. Just like we thought that.
Oh yeah, he kept relaying things to me every hour. He was like, "Yeah, it's looking rough for them.
I mean, this is why people always say, like, it's really hard to be prejudiced when you actually know somebody from the group you're
Yeah.
trying to be prejudiced against, and, like, I think a lot of them sound like they couldn't do it once they realized that, like, "Wait, we're not talking about some abstract here. We're not talking about some caricature. We're talking about Tyler."
Yeah.
And at that point, then it gets severely real,
Yeah, no, it definitely changed things for them.
right? So, how much do you think the arrests and convictions set them back once they all got arrested and you got arrested for the harassment of the journalists?
Honestly, I some part of me it feels like it's definitely my fault they had to rebrand.
Well, good job. No, seriously, that was effective. They had some effective branding, and if you made them stop using it, good job.
I think I did because like once it got out that like, oh hey, one of our members they're fucking trans. I think
That's
that was a
so
big
funny.
issue for them going forward with propaganda.
Right,
Because like
right.
the proof was already out that like, yeah, I'm trans.
What is a
So
woman? Don't go ask Atomwaffen. They don't know.
yeah. Yeah, they don't fucking know.
Oh
What
man,
is a
that's
man?
just
I don't
so
know.
rough. So rough for them. Just, I'm laughing because, it's just so horrifically funny to think about these guys thinking that they are like the vanguard of a new, Aryan revolution and they can't get something like that right. That's truly
Oh
hilarious.
no. The other thing I think that was like the nail of the coffin for the group was the whole Florida cell not getting the right address, me being a part of that.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
I
right.
think
Yes.
that kind of proved that we were a little stupid.
Kind of a little gang who couldn't shoot straight energy there going.
Yeah, so that definitely did it too, for sure.
Right on, right on. That's truly hilarious that like you managed to make them kind of stop using that iconography and stop using that name because it became kind of a joke after that. So
Oh yeah.
that's some pretty good work. And what are some of the other things that you've done since you've left to kind of make things right as far as some of the harm you've caused as a result?
So back to like when you were saying when I was like actually out, I wasn't really mentally out until 2022
Okay.
because I was still trying to get away from some of that stuff, but I was like kind of on the fault line of maybe I'll just be a conservative and that'll
Right.
be good enough. But like at the time, my wife at the time, she was like, I can see that you're still not changing your ways a bit, and I have an issue with that. And I was like,
Right.
okay, well, I kind of do too. And I remember I was listening to one podcast that I think Sydney Watson was talking about Vosh,
Okay.
funny enough. And I started listening to Vosh a little bit because it just the absurd thing that she was saying about him. I'm like, did he really say that? I want to see that if so. And then I looked and he didn't say the thing that she said. And I was
Right.
like, oh, this is interesting. And then I saw him debate Nazis and I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Huh.
Maybe I'm an idiot.
So, like, you actually watched an internet debate and got convinced. That's pretty impressive. I've
Yeah,
been very skeptical about whether that actually happens, but you're telling me that, like, that did happen. Huh,
yeah,
okay.
no, it did happen. It was like, oh, maybe I'm an idiot, but it took like, it wasn't like an instance in like the first video I watched. I just kept watching him. I'm like, this guy's kind of interesting. I'm gonna see his points. And the more I saw his points, I was like, oh, fuck, I'm stupid. Oh, I'm fucking stupid. Like, I didn't even know what to say at that point.
Huh,
And then I got to a certain point where I was like, I feel like I'm still prone to fall into this pit, and I don't want to fall into this pit. So
right.
I reached out to Christian Picciolini
Okay.
twice, and I was like, "Hey, this is my situation. I'm trans. I was a part of Atomwaffen Division. Mentally, I don't know if I'm prone to fall back into this, but I do not want to fall back into this. How can you help me?" type of thing.
Right, right.
And at the time, he was like, I'm a little backed up right now, but I do have somebody who lives in Florida who can help you." And he put me to Scott Ernest with Hands of Air.
Right, right.
And from there, I mean, Scott's done a very great job at keeping me sane. So,
Nice. Yeah, we're definitely planning on having Scott on a future episode of the podcast. He's done some really great work from the sounds of things, and he's got some stories to tell as well. So we'll definitely have to look forward to that.
so from the past 2 years, I guess, because I still didn't have access to social media or anything, because the FBI said for my probation terms, I wasn't allowed to have access to other people via social media just to make sure I wasn't,
Yeah.
sending
Yeah.
bomb material or teaching people how to make
Sure.
their own makeshift
Mm,
guns. Because when they got my computer, they found a lot of stuff,
right,
a lot of
right.
stuff. And they were like, yeah, we can't trust this guy to talk to people online.
Sure. Because there is a lot of stuff on there that circulates in the various Telegram groups and whatnot that is very definitely stuff that the FBI would have a problem with if they found it on your computer when they busted you. So, not
Oh,
really at all
oh yeah.
surprised you would have had things like that on your machine at that point.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. They still won't give me my computer back till this day. They're like, yeah, no. And I was like, okay, that's fair. That's fair. I can't argue that.
Right.
But during like these past few years, it's been more of like still like recovery mode to an extent, because now I'm left with a lot of guilt. And I have been talking to people off the record while I was on probation, because I wasn't sure if I would get in trouble for being technically on social media indirectly. And I was like, well, I want to help, even if nobody knows that I'm helping, at least like let me do something.
Definitely. You want to do something because you feel like you need to do something. And even if they don't necessarily want you to do something, you still have to feel like, man, I still need to do something. So,
Right. The guilt really fucking kills you. It really it breaks you down, and like it gets worse sometimes when you know like there's some people out there that just they don't fucking believe you, and then it's like, oh fuck, I'm just this terrible piece of shit.
so if you could go back and talk to, say, 16-year-old Tyler, the Tyler that was starting to read some of the, alt-right pipeline stuff, and if you had a chance to talk to that version of Tyler now, knowing what you know, what would you say to your younger self?
Honestly, I don't even know what I would say, because like at the time I was just angry, and I didn't listen to anybody around me. I'm gonna be honest with you, like everybody around me seemed to try to pull me out of it, and there was no way I was gonna listen. I kind of wish that in some way somebody threw communist literature at me instead.
Huh. You think that would have helped at the time? You think you would have picked up on that the same way you picked up on the white nationalist stuff?
Yeah, I think the rage would be still still there, but it would be for something good at least. Like, yeah, everybody deserves a decent life. Nobody deserves to suffer. I'm suffering, so why would I want somebody else to suffer the way I suffer? That would be my different look on it. And that's my look on it now. It's like, I'm suffering. Why do I want somebody else to suffer? I have
Yeah.
caused suffering in myself and in other people, and I feel bad about it, and I know how shitty it is. So why would I want that to continue? You know?
Right. Right. Definitely. You're perpetuating it.
Yeah. If that was thrown in front of me, things would be a whole lot different.
Okay. So people tried, they just couldn't really come up with what you were going to hear. It sounds like what you're saying. Like they maybe came at it from the wrong perspective. They didn't understand the anger.
Yeah, the rage definitely could have been used towards something more productive, and it just nobody had the productive resources to give me, I guess, is what we could go with.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that makes sense, definitely. If somebody had been able to point you in a more positive direction as opposed to just kind of telling you not to be angry. Because it seems like that's what they were saying to some extent, like, don't be angry. And it's like, that never really works all that well. Generally, you got to figure out where to put that.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same shit my dad says to me. Hey, don't be upset, don't be angry, just chill out. And it's like, okay, well now I'm even more fucking angry and upset.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely usually people's response when you say, oh, come on, don't be angry. Just calm down. It's like, if I was capable of doing that, do you think I'd need you to tell me?
Yeah,
Seriously.
exactly.
So, what would you say to somebody who's still involved? Like, somebody like you mentioned the one guy, the cell leader, somebody who's still involved but might be wavering about whether they want to stay involved in all of this.
So honestly, it's really hard to get out of that. It's easy to get in, hard to get out. My best word of advice would be pay attention to the cracks. Like there's always going to be slip ups of like the truth of the group you're in, or like what propaganda they're pushing towards like what is actually going on. And if you pay attention to more of the opposition, you'll find yourself sitting there stupid. Like you will feel stupid and you will start to second guess it. And as soon as you do second guess it, it's already over for you. It's probably time to leave. If you have a support system based on that, I hate to say like the best thing to do is go cold turkey, but that is the best thing to do. And there are other resources out there if you look hard enough that can keep you on the right path. I mean, yeah, I took what, 2 years to finally say, yeah, I'm gonna go pursue those resources, but I did and it helped. So I would suggest that for anybody that is in the situation right now where they're like, well, I want to leave, but this has been my whole life, so I'm not really sure what I can do.
Right, right. You're in a situation where like your livelihood might be dependent on it, your housing might be dependent on it.
Yeah.
You don't really feel like you can necessarily walk away because everything in your life is sort of based around this. Even if it's just like your entire social circle, everybody you know is involved. So there are resources out there, you're right. There are people out there who have been there before. People like Christian, people like Scott, people like the Life After Hate people. There are definitely some people out there that know where you've been and want to make sure that you get out if you want to get out.
Yeah, and I would also suggest too listening to a lot of formers stories because you find like a lot of the people that are formers have like the same, I don't want to say the same, but similar lines of, okay, I think it's time to get out. Okay, now I'm out and I feel like a piece of shit. What can I do?
Right. Because it seems like that always hits. There's always that stage of like, I'm a horrible person for all of this. How do I atone?
Yeah, yeah, it's actually somebody I'm talking to right now is working on research of that, specifically like the former's guilt. And it's really interesting on how many people feel the same thing. Like, I am an irredeemable piece of shit. What can I do to try to make this better? How can I make this right?
It's definitely been consistent. You're probably, I think, the fifth former I've had on this podcast, and every single person that we've had on has said the same thing. They've always felt like, wow, that was just awful. Why did I do that? What can I do to fix this going forward? It's been very common from all of them. So that'll be some interesting research when somebody figures that out. I would definitely be interested in reading that.
Yeah, the way it was explained, it was like it's kind of gonna haunt us per se for a long time.
Have they ever kind of said you really get past it, or do you always kind of have that in the back of your mind?
It lingers. It lingers in like different ways though. Like I don't even know how to describe it. It starts for me personally. It starts to become like an overall guilt thing where I just feel like a guilty person, and I'm not entirely sure how to like put it, but I mean, I joked on Blue Sky, like I had this moment where I was like, oh, I'm speaking too loud. I deserve to be hit by a semi type of thing.
Right, like everything is just magnified, all the stuff that you
Yeah, it's like your day-to-day life. You're like, oh, am I doing something wrong?
right, right.
Am I upsetting somebody somehow? It's weird.
So you always kind of blame yourself a little bit, like for every possible thing that you could possibly blame yourself for. You go from like one extreme to the other, I think, on that. Like,
Yeah,
we are the chosen ones. We're the ones that are going to figure all this out. To, oh my God, everything that's ever been wrong with the world is my fault.
yeah. You just feel like a big sinner.
Of course, and life is the rest of your life is probably trying to find that balance to some extent between those two sort of feelings of like, it's all my fault and none of it is my fault because it's not all your fault. There's a lot of things that are wrong with the world that you had nothing to do with. Things were screwed up long before you came along. So you got to
Right.
learn how not to blame yourself for that kind of stuff. And it sounds like you're kind of on the right path with it. So you're young. You said you were 25. You've got hopefully a lot of years ahead of you. What are some of the things that you want to do going forward, like with your life? Just general, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years?
Uh, I don't know. The point I'm at right now, I'm actually at my lowest point I've been at. So, um, the I mean, my main goals right now is get a new vehicle. Eventually, I don't know, my 3-year plan within the next 3 years is probably going to get my own RV. I do want my boyfriend to move in with me and get out of Florida because Florida, I have a lot to say of Florida. It's fucking unsafe in many different ways.
Right,
I got lucky enough to get out of there, but I just kind of want to focus on still providing information that I did off record, on record, just talking about Atomwaffen and trying to get people to not fall into those groups.
right, right,
As far as like work goes, I mean, I struggle to find a job because of that felony. It's really rough. I get denied a lot, and when people find the felony, they look a little further, and then they say, "Oh well, damn, this kid's pretty much a piece of shit."
yeah,
They're less inclined to hire me for sure. I mean, I really don't necessarily care what job I land as long as I have a job. I'm thinking about going back to school.
so you're kind of just trying to build a life, mainly. You're trying to get on
Yeah,
with the rest of your life and build yourself something that you can, just live.
yeah, I'm not asking for like a happy, great life, but I just want a decent enough life to where it, you take the comfortable with the uncomfortable and you just deal.
Right, right. So how can people support you and the work you're doing?
Uh, yeah, honestly, it doesn't really matter to me as long as I can talk with somebody, provide any information that would be helpful, useful for research reasons, journalist reasons,
Right,
even right now, podcast interview, the video I agreed to, as long as I can do that, that is good enough for me.
right, definitely.
I would always suggest, Christians' Life After Hate, or, for sure, Scott's Hands of Air.
Right, right.
But, I'm a little more partial to Scott because
Well,
I
of
work with
course.
him directly.
Yeah, Scott seems like a great guy. I mean, I've just talked to him on Blue Sky a few times, but Scott definitely seems like one of the good ones. And, we hit it off pretty good. So hopefully, like I said, I get him on. He can talk a little more about Hands of Air and what that's up to, how that actually works.
Yeah, he has a heart of gold.
Right on. We do have a lot of journalists who listen to this. We have a lot of journalists that pay a lot of attention to what we're doing. So if this is something that you're researching, reach out to Tyler on Blue Sky, reach out to me. I'll put you in touch with him. And, seems like he's more than willing to help you out with whatever project you're doing at this point that might require, his perspective on it. Tyler, thank you. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I know some of this wasn't easy, but it was really good to get your perspective on where you've been, where you're going, and what, somebody who wasn't necessarily looking for this kind of thing, but ends up, sort of stumbling into the pipeline could find if they end up clicking the wrong link or listening to too many Ben Shapiro videos in 2017. That's it's funny to me that we just saw all this happen with Jake Shields. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a former pro MMA fighter who went from being kind of a normie conservative in 2016 to being like Nick Fuentes' best friend now. He's a complete Nazi at this point.
Yeah, doesn't he post a lot about Gaza
Yes.
and the IDF? Yes. Okay. Yes, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Right. He got a ton of followers posting about Gaza, but he's also super not into the Jews. He's not doing it because he's so concerned about the Palestinians. He's doing it because he hates the Jews. And he's one of those guys that you kind of got to watch and be like, well, I might agree with you on this particular subject, but the place you're coming from, oh, hell no.
And it's like, I know that you're actually coming from the pits of hell, so.
You hang out with all these just like really horrible people. I mean, motherfucker had David Duke on his podcast not too long ago.
Of course.
It's like, are you kidding me? Yeah, you and David Duke, man. I mean, just you do that. You go talk to that old fossil. Have fun. It's just, I'm sure you'll probably learn a thing or two. Anyway, so yeah, thank you so much, Tyler. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and it was really good getting to talk to you. Hopefully, we reach out again and do this again at some point. Let me know when you want to do this again, and we'll talk again.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast. If you want to hear more, you can find us on the web at didnothingwrongpod.com. Please make sure you subscribe to get our content straight into your inbox. You can also follow us on Twitter at GrizaBJJ, GRZABJJ, as well as DNWPod. We're extremely grateful for paid subscriptions and donations that allow us to keep doing this important work. Thanks, and remember, everyone mentioned did nothing wrong.